Good evening. On behalf of Newark Public Library, I want to thank you all for joining us for tonight's program. Before you can say Jackie Robinson, Black Baseball in the Era of the Color Line. As always, before we proceed, I would like to start off by acknowledging the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Munsee Lenape First Nations, on which we are learning, laboring, and organizing today. We also recognize the devastation and continued legacy of the transatlantic slave trade, which contributed to present-day systemic racism and oppression. Our space here at the Newark Public Library is the James Brown African American Room. The space was named in honor of the late James Library Brown, an influential librarian, poet, and activist who was instrumental in making sure the library sought and maintained books and resources that examined and celebrated the African American experience. Mr. Brown was especially committed to urging Newark youth to pursue education and to understand the importance of the library's role in their academic growth. With that, we honor, and try to fill these big shoes, and excited to have those who are doing the work out there and invite them on. And, with that, I'm honored to introduce our two guests for this evening, starting with Dr. Lawrence Hogan. Dr. Lawrence Hogan was a professor of history emeritus, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, at Union College in New Jersey. He's the author of Forgotten History of African American Baseball and principal author and editor of Shades of Glory, which was published by National Geographic, as well as several other books. He is the executive director of the documentary, which shares this program's name, Before You Can Say Jackie Robinson, Black Baseball in America in the Era of the Color Line. And I don't know if I meant to double check latest work, and maybe you please let me know if this is correct, was Harlem's First Citizens, John Howard Johnson at St. Martin's, a priest and his people in the making of Harlem.
Oh, that's correct.
That's it. Okay, good. So yes, and just a little additional bona fides for Dr. Hogan. He has been called a national treasure by John Thorne, who is the official historian of Major League Baseball. So, that's as bona fide as it gets, in my opinion. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Hogan. We truly appreciate you being here and look forward to the program tonight.
Pleasure to be here.
And our other guest tonight, who we're equally honored to welcome, is Kevin Kane. Kevin has made the better part of his living as a writer, musician, and playwright. His Negro League version of Casey at the Bat, called Breaking the Line with the Mudville Nine, was written for and first performed at the Cooperstown National Baseball Hall of Fame. He served as a performance representative for his good friend, there's a big name drop right here, for the noted playwright August Wilson. That's a major friend to have. Informally, he taught performing arts at the Paul Laurence Dunbar Middle School in the Bronx. So please join me in welcoming these two gentlemen for tonight's program. We look forward to, it's especially during baseball season, there's so much of this history that gets overlooked. So we're just thankful to have you both here to, enlighten many who may not know this history. And, so please feel free to chime in with any questions as they give their presentation, and I'll keep an eye, put questions in the chat on Facebook or on Zoom, whichever platform you're on. So thank you both again, and I will cede the floor to you.
Thanks, Reggie. Good job.
Thanks, Reggie. Pleasure, as I say, a pleasure to be here. I'll start it out. Kevin's going to come in a wonderful way as we move into the program. But I'll start it out with a question I frequently ask. What do they say about lawyers? You don't ask a question that you don't know the answer to. Well, the question that I'm asking, I know the answer to. who would you expect to focus on in a history of Black baseball? And I think the answer is probably an obvious one: Jackie Robinson. If anybody represents Black baseball in the history of America, it is very clearly Jackie. But the title of our program is Before You Can Say Jackie Robinson. What it is the 60 or 70 years or thereabouts of Black baseball history that was in the Negro Leagues. And there was a connection between Jackie coming into the majors and Negro League baseball. Some of you may know that he was a player with the Kansas City Monarchs, the shortstop with the Kansas City Monarchs in the American Black Baseball League. So he learned some of his baseball there. But where I go with this, Jackie is not first in a funny, interesting sort of way. I take this story back to 1884, and a team out in Ohio, Toledo, Ohio, called the Toledo Mudheads. And there was a catcher, a very good catcher, decent hitter too, who played for that team through the season of 1884. His name was Moses Fleetwood Walker. Now, historians, and Black man, obviously, that's why I'm paying attention to him here, Black catcher. Historians say that the American Association in which the Toledo Mudheads were in was a major league that season. This is the infant starting of Major League Baseball. So Jackie isn't the first. Moses Fleetwood Walker was the first. I'll get to what happens with Moses and some of his other compadres in just a second. But Moses, as I say, was a very good catcher and a good hitter, and played that entire season with the Mudheads, the Toledo Mudheads. His brother, Weldy Walker, played for a few games too. So there's two Blacks who are playing in Major League Baseball before Jackie. Now, one of the things that is interesting for us, because we're so much into New Jersey, is that New Jersey has some major places historically where Black baseball, the old Negro Leagues, well, not leagues, because that wouldn't happen until the turn of the century, but Negro professional teams played. One of those teams was the Cuban Giants, which is arguably the very first Black professional baseball team. It had its home in Trenton, New Jersey for the season of 1887. It had only been formed in 1885, so it begins to play on a very high level pretty quickly. The Cuban Giants was the first of the Black teams then playing Black professional teams. Now, something else New Jersey-wise happens in that same time period. In 1886, well, here, let me preface it this way. The gentleman's agreement, they call it, that this unspoken keeping out of Blacks from baseball, the gentleman's agreements, they kept it quiet, but they did it. It was kind of hard to hide, but they did it. The one time in the history of Black baseball and the color line, the racism that was there, is written out in 1886 in the aftermath of this game that I'm going to take you to. The Chicago White Stockings, a professional international baseball team, the predecessor to the Chicago Cubs, is coming to Newark for a major game. All of Newark is abuzz because this team is tops in the nation at this point in time. And they're going to play an exhibition game against the Newark Little Giants. The day is July 14th that they're going to play this game. And all Newark is abuzz, as I say, about this baseball event. The Moses Fleetwood Walker that I referred to just a minute or two ago is the catcher for the Little Giants in Newark. do you catch the thing that's interesting here? That there's a black man playing now for one of the top teams in the International League. He's the catcher, but there's another black man on this team. His name is George Stovey. He would win 30 games that season pitching for this, quote, white team that had these two blacks on it. Somebody who's pitching and winning 30 games is obviously an outstanding star, the ace of the team, ace pitching-wise. And he's expected to pitch that day against this white high minor league team that's coming in. And word comes ahead from the Chicago manager and owner, Cap Anson, that if those two so-and-sos, and he uses a term stronger than so-and-so, if those two so-and-sos are playing out on the field that day, my team is not going to take the field. Well, what happens is that these two black players are made to disappear that day. Management, being what it is bowing to racism. Now it's the 14th of July that this is taking place. The next day, the International League owners, in a meeting, place a statute in their rules that no more black players will be allowed to play. So the gentleman's agreement, this is the only time that you ever see it written down. It was, this quiet understanding between them. And it happened in Newark. Now that's the start in a very explicit way of the color line and of racism in baseball. Now, that's Newark, New Jersey. Now, the next place that we're going to stop is not so much in Newark, but in the Supreme Court of the United States. I think probably that you maybe didn't expect to be going there because this is baseball, but it's also a part of a larger world that's turning against blacks in explicit sorts of ways. And I've got something to read to you here. It comes from a fellow named Henry McNeil Turner. It's Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, Bishop of AME Zion, and a very well-known black man across America at this point in time. And it's a comment on what's happened in the court system. It's written in 1889, but it's a roadway into something that'll happen in 1896 that I'll get to later. Just listen to this. He's pretty upset at what's going on in the court system because the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments have pretty much been negated by court decisions in the 1880s. And here's Henry McNeil Turner speaking about that. A word more, and I am done, as you wish with brevity. God may forgive this corps of unjust judges. I never can. Their very memories will be detested by my children's children, nor am I alone in this detestation. The 8 millions of my race and their posterity will stand horror-frozen at the very mention of their names. The scenes that have passed under my eyes upon the public highways, the brutal treatment of helpless women, which I have witnessed since that decision was proclaimed, is enough to move heaven to tears and raise a loud acclaim in hell over the conquest. But Henry McNeil Turner is not giving up. But we will wait and pray and look for a better day, for God still lives and the Lord of hosts reigns. Well, that's a reflection of what's happening in the larger society right across the board, but it's also a reflection of what's happening to those blacks who were playing organized baseball in the various leagues, the American Association, International League. By the middle of the 1890s, that's no longer a case. They've been drummed out, and what the American Association did first, all these other leagues do as well. So by the middle, towards the end, we have records of about 30 or so blacks who played in, quote, white baseball through that time period. I guess it can't be called just white baseball if there are a whole lot of blacks playing, but it was owned, run by whites and whatnot, and their teammates were white. But by the 1895-96 period, there are no more blacks playing in organized baseball. 1896. If I had some of you right in view here, I would pinpoint this discussion with a question. I start out with a question. I've got another question. What happened in 1896 that was so significant to the position of blacks in this country? It's called Plessy versus Ferguson. That decision that brings in explicit and very wide sorts of ways segregation sanctioned by law. The decision in Plessy versus Ferguson, in effect, well, the phrase that was used, separate but equal, and we know that separate was going to be there, equal was not going to be there. So what's happening here, I always say, is that stop signs are going up. Stop signs in terms of baseball and so many other things in America at that point in time. You can't be this, you can't be that, you can't go there, you can't get an education, on and on. All the can'ts that are out there. Now, the question is, what do you do in the face of can'ts? Lots of people say, well, you protest. Well, they did protest, but protesting was not going to do anything in the short run or even in the long run. What you do is turn in on yourself and do for yourself what the larger world is telling you that you can't do. So in this time period, we see the growth of black newspapers, major national newspapers for the first time. We see black colleges coming into existence, black businesses where blacks are starting to come from the South into the North. And things are turning black for blacks themselves. They're doing for themselves what the larger world said you can't do. And it's in that time period that black baseball teams come into being. If you can't get into the majors, you're going to do for yourself. Great teams, independent teams. They aren't league teams yet because the leagues won't start until 1920, but very good professional teams. Teams like the Chicago American Giants, teams like the Brooklyn Royal Giants, teams like the Philadelphia American Giants, and other teams like that. So it's great baseball, and they're playing it on their own terms. Well, there's another team that I want to pay attention to for just a bit here. And that team is very close to the hearts of New Jerseyans. It's 1916, and a couple of black businessmen and a white man who's running for mayor in Atlantic City bring up from Jacksonville, Florida, an entire team of black players. And they become named the Bacharach Giants when they get to Atlantic City. This is May of 1916. Bacharach, Harry Bacharach, was the white person running for mayor. And he wanted to associate, and this sounds, kind of odd. A white man in politics wanting to associate himself with black teams. On the face of it, it doesn't make sense. Well, here, let's see if we can make sense out of it. The team arrives on May the 5th, 1916 in Atlantic City. As I say, sponsored by two black businessmen and by Harry Bacharach, which makes it even more unusual because this white man is associated with two black men in the light of, public light. Well, they came up on May the 5th. On May the 8th, they were down in the courthouse in Atlantic City being registered to vote. And on May the 10th, they were in City Hall and being given political jobs. Several of them got political jobs. Well, what's going on here?
New Jersey politics.
Yeah, Jersey politics, which is, the bread and butter of Jersey. That's why it's still today. What's going on is that Harry Bacharach wants to associate himself with black teams, Negro teams, as they were called back then, because there's a black population, Negro population in Atlantic City. significant enough, the hotels, the resorts and whatnot, that they form a voting bloc, and he wants those votes in what he knows will be a very close election. Well, this team, the Bacharach Giants, the Atlantic City Bacharach Giants, one of the great teams in the history of African-American baseball. It's a team that in 1926 and 1927 represents the American National League, Black American National League, in a World Series against the Chicago American Giants, both those years. There was a Black World Series back then. I always say, I run in here a question, how many baseball fans do we have in this? I assume, all of you are to one degree or another. And the question is, who throws the first no-hit, no-run game, and it happens to be a perfect game, in baseball history in the World Series? Well, the answer is Don Larson in 1956. When Yogi comes from beyond the plate, out from behind the plate, and jumps in Larson's arm, this famous photo that you see. Wrong answer. The right answer is in 1926, a gentleman named Claude Red Greer, pitching for the Atlantic City Bacharach Giants in the Negro World Series, throws a no-hit, no-run game against the Chicago American Giants. So the next time somebody asks you whether, who was the first, you can say Claude Red Greer was the first. The team is just a great team. And if you remember anything at all from what we say tonight, remember the name John Henry Pop Lloyd, greatest shortstop in the history of the game. Well, I didn't say the black game, I said the game. That argument can be made. He's in the National Baseball Hall of Fame right now. Let me repeat his name, John Henry Pop Lloyd, great shortstop, and great in terms of his person as well. And he played for the Atlantic City Bacharachs, and he managed Atlantic City Bacharachs through this time period. Kevin, you know what's coming next.
You ready for the video?
Ready for the video. You're going to meet
Go to the
John Henry
video.
Pop Lloyd in a very
Go to the
special
video.
sort of way.
All right.
Going either way. In our league, there was nothing outlawed, nothing. They threw at you intentionally. The umpires knew it. Everybody knew it.
Sharpen the spike
They
with
sharpen the
fouls.
spike. You walk in the clubhouse and you find 15 men with fouls. Sharpen the spikes up to cut somebody. You understand? Yeah. I mean, they were a mean bunch of fellas. They used to get mad with me because I wouldn't cut people. My own teammates fussed with me and argued with me because I didn't cut anybody going into base. Fast as you can run, you ain't nobody supposed to throw you out. That's what they would tell me. But I couldn't see it. Eventually, they let me alone. But it was mean in that league. It was mean.
Yeah, we scored a run and Cass knocked the umpire down.
No, the incident really happened. They scored a run. It was 1-0. It was late innings. Dobie was on second base, and Monty Irvin was the next hitter. He had a screaming line drive, one hop to the shortstop, Frank Austin. He threw it to first base, and Dobie was off with the pitch. He never stopped at third base. And when Dennis threw the ball to me, well, Dobie was only halfway home, and I went up the line to meet him. When Dobie came in on all fours, I went down on my knees. And the plate was about 4 feet behind me. And Chick Solomon, he was writing for the Amsterdam News. He clicked the picture, and he showed the home plate behind me. And the umpire called him safe. And I say, what? And my glove happened to hit him up under the picture. And he fell back, and he suspended me for 3 games and fined me. So
I just wanted to be a real good ball player. I didn't know whether or not I'd ever play, professionally. I didn't ever know whether I'd ever play in the major leagues, but I certainly wanted to play in the Negro leagues. You see, at that time, we aspired to playing in the Negro leagues. That was as high as our aspirations could go. And because now, I would say, well, one of these years, maybe I'd like to play for the Homestead Grays, or one of these years I'd like to play for the Newark Eagles, or I'd like to play for the Lincoln Giants, or I'd like to play with the Pittsburgh Crawfords. If you were a baseball player, you did aspire to playing with one of those clubs. Now, we never knew that later on we'd get a chance to play in the majors, but those were our inspirations at that time.
We loved the game. We loved the game. We, just like Pint was saying, Pint Israel was saying, when we played against one another, we were really ferocious against one another. But after the game was over, love and peace and harmony, but it was nothing like baseball in those days.
Well, that's the way baseball was. It was something that you enjoyed doing. It's a fun game. What the heck?
Yeah.
You're supposed to have fun out of it. They make a business. They make it too serious now. Really.
When they told me they was going to pay me to play baseball, I said, they got to be crazy. No, I said, I'd play for nothing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I said, they got to be.
I always held these people in esteem because they were great athletes, and they had a dignity, a kind of self-contained sense of worth.
When we look back at the segregation era, we're oftentimes think of the oppressiveness of it all, and indeed it was oppressive. Blacks were poor, Southern blacks in rural areas especially were without the right to vote. The Great Migration north had begun to show the signs of failure. But despite all of that, and underneath the veneer of that oppression, collectively and individually blacks were able to accomplish great things. And individually, black men were oftentimes marked with the qualities of decency, respectability. These guys had great senses of humor, and they were great athletes. When I think of those qualities, I often think of Pop Lloyd of Atlantic City, New Jersey.
John Lloyd was one of the finest shortstops that ever played in the Negro Leagues. He was tall and rangy and had a good arm, and more than anything else, he was a great hitter.
There are many recollections I have about Pop Lloyd. The biggest thing I'd like to say about him was that he was truly a gentle giant, and he was strong. He was a strong individual. He was strong in character. He was an honest man. He was a wonderful person, and it seemed as though adversity would just seem to fall off of his shoulders, and he would never dwell on adversity, that he would always go to the brighter side of whatever might come up at any particular time.
He was a lovable man, and he was a great ball player. He won one St. Louis baseball writer, referred to him as the greatest ball player. He was asked to, was the greatest baseball player he'd ever seen. And the baseball writer said, well, if you mean in organized baseball, I'd have to say Babe Ruth. He says, but if you mean in all baseball, he says, it's an Atlantic City colored man named John Henry Lloyd. And he compared him to Hans Wagner. And Hans Wagner later said he felt honored to be compared with, or have John Lloyd compared with him. But John was I just loved the man. You can see that by the tears.
I guess Pop Lloyd is partially the reason why I am the mayor today. Because Pop taught me to be patient and not to be an angry young man. You see, I was angry because I had gone through the same thing as a professional basketball player, where we had been a great ball player and played with the New York Rens, which was a professional team, and yet we were not allowed to play in certain places because we were not white. And when I asked Pop, I said, Pop, aren't you angry about this? He said, well, I'm disturbed a little bit, but it's just something that happens. And Pop would give you that old laugh, and he would just keep on doing what he said, your time will come. And I've never forgotten that. Pop always would say, your time would come.
We talk a lot about the civil rights movement and when it begins, who starts it. It may be that the civil rights movement had many beginnings. Some of those beginnings are found on buses and lunch counters on dusky roads in the South, and on the playing field of Negro baseball teams. it seems to me these guys must have known that they were involved in the most American of all pursuits, competition. But they weren't recognized, they weren't lionized in the larger American society. They were only recognized and appreciated, if you will, by their own people. So I think they must have looked forward to a day when, perhaps on their own terms, they would be recognized as great athletes, great American athletes. Seems to me that those sentiments, that vision, is one of the beginnings, one of the seeds of the modern civil rights movement.
Okay, we're coming back to having to listen to me and Kevin.
Yeah.
I hope you got all of that. It's a wonderful sequence in our documentary, the same title, Before You Can Say Jackie Robinson, et cetera, et cetera. And the people who came onto that screen, Mary
Hang on.
Baraka starts it out and talks about how distinguished those players were. Clement Price, I expect you all know Clement Price, comes in at the beginning and then comes in at the end in a very special way. Atlantic City longtime sports writer, actually the head of the press in Atlantic City sports-wise, Henry White Grueller. He cries over Pop in his memories of Pop. And of course, Leon Day, who I just dearly loved. Leon says, I couldn't believe they were going to pay me to play baseball. I'd play it for nothing. Just a comment or two, and then I'm going to bring Kevin into play here. I think particularly interesting is what Clement Price, Dr. Price, has to say at the end of the segment you just watched, where he says this is the beginning of the civil rights movement, one of the beginnings of the civil rights movement. You don't normally connect, I think, civil rights and baseball, but I think he does it very well. It seems to me that wherever blacks walked with pride, held themselves with pride, played baseball with pride, played it very well, that was a piece of the civil rights movement, not waiting for 1954, 55, the Montgomery place, but way back there. So I think Clement is right on the mark. We're going to go into something else now that I think in just wonderful ways captures the essence of what Negro League Baseball was about. It captures the feeling that was there by the players themselves. And it does it in wonderful, funny, and very serious sorts of ways. I'm going to turn this over to Kevin and to somebody who took the place of another fella in baseball. Iconically, I think it should be that. Kevin, give us that poem.
Yeah. All right. I hope that most people are familiar with Casey at the Bat, which is such an iconic and landmark of an American poem. When I was a young boy, we all learned it by heart, and that and other narrative poems about American history. Somebody once said of Casey at the Bat, it might not be great poetry, but it's a good poem. Well, I'd have to ask, if Casey at the Bat isn't great poetry, then what is? John Keats's Ode to Dejection, Petrarchian's Sonnets of Melancholy, Longfellow's Hiawatha. Has anyone ever tried to read that? I'll stick with Casey at the Bat every single time. There may be no poem in the English language that has provoked or demanded even more poetic responses to the original than Thayer's Casey at the Bat. There have been parodies and sequels and what ifs and cartoons and any number of alternate outcomes. Well, I've written a poem that isn't one of those. It's a poem that comes after Casey, but it's not about Casey, about another ball player, and it's about us. Like Thayer's original poem, some might not call these verses great poetry, but again, I would ask, if Casey at the Bat and other simple poems about baseball aren't great poetry, then what is? No, the outcome wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. Man, you could say that again. It was embarrassing to see the way those boys couldn't play. Mighty Casey standing there staring at two meatballs down the middle. And then the pitcher serves him up a tasty looking fastball delivered on a platter, hot off the griddle. Old Casey wasn't looking so big then, didn't seem so keen of sight or blessed with might. Time for a name change here. Instead of Mighty Casey, from now on, maybe we should just call him less than the best, but at least he was white. No. This is no time to be bringing up old slights. What's done is done, and there's no going back. And so I won't bring up all the work done for little or nothing over the years by folks that were Black. I guess I could never help being confused, though, at the way some folks were used, and used hard, I might say, worked and worked some more, and then never let to play. At least not where the money was, where the grass was green and always cut. I'm talking about before, Jackie, way back when Black men couldn't play ball. Say what? Couldn't play? They could play, and play they did every day, as well as any in the land, with hearts and souls, pitching and hitting and running on lots littered with stones and sand. But back to Casey, that mighty man who left the fans in Mudville that day crying. Time to put that batter down is what I say, like you might an old dog dying. Not because you don't love him still, and not because that dog ain't trying, but it's long past time, son, to just move on, to put a new end to that story. Let's put a man in that poem who can hit the ball, maybe a darker shade of glory. Well, all right. We'll go back, like so many writers have before, to that Mudville patch of dirt. And let's just say, because it might have happened this way, say somehow Casey, he got hurt. Say, just for speculation here, for grins and giggles, if you will, say Casey stubbed his toe in the 8th, and they went to the bench with a lineup card to fill. Well, say Cooney had already hit the showers. You know, it probably happened more than once that way. And Jimmy Flynn had emptied a case of Rheingold cans and was way too soused to play. The other ball players that had been sitting there on the bench, waiting for their turn to come, they'd left the ballpark already, thinking the game that day was done. There was just one old Black man in the clubhouse holding a broom who said, "I've been known to swing a bat." Yeah. And so with no one else to send up to the plate, well, they gave him Casey's shirt and hat and said, if anyone should ask, and we mean anyone, you just tell them you recently lost a bit of weight and you've been working a lot in the sun. We're going to call you Casey, if you don't mind. And for today, that's who you'll be. That's fine, he said, because that's my name. I played a little ball in Kansas City once, and since then have been called KC. KC from Kansas City. He was a monarch if ever there was one. The king of clout he'd been called. The prince of players. The duke of getting it done. You talk about your Casey, batting nothing for those Mudville 9. Let me tell you here the story about this shade of glory who played in another time. I know you've all heard what they tell about cool Papa Bell, who, when wearied from knocking him out of the park, could turn off the light and be under the covers, asleep in his bed in his hotel room before the hotel room was dark. Or of Josh Gibson, who with one prodigious swat cleared the stadium wall with a hard-hit ball in the house they say Ruth built. The naysayers may cry, it's a lie. Well, no one has ever kept naysayers from naying. But that ball was still going up toward the sky when it was lost to the eye, and it never was found. I'm just saying. Now, I suppose you're going to want to bring up Ty Cobb. And well, you should, because Cobb was good. But was he really great? How many times would Ty Cobb have stolen second base if there'd been, say, Big Lou Santop in a crouch behind the plate? Cobb could hit the ball better than most, I'll give you that. And for his time, he was all the rage. But how would Ty Cobb have done if he had to face someone like a young Leroy Satchel Paige. Old Cobb had come at you with his bat when he wasn't sliding in hard, cutting you with both spiked feet. It's a cruel way to win. Unlike stealing home clean as a whistle, like Jackie done, sliding safe and popping right back up without missing a beat. Yeah, Jackie, he stole second a slew of times. And he stole third a whole bunch too. And more than once, that man stole home with his conscience clear and the pitcher just standing there holding the ball, not knowing what to do. The best that most ball players today could do could be fairly compared to Jackie's worst. On a third strike dropped one time by a catcher in Brooklyn, I watched that man steal first. Old KC was the likes of all that, though older now and crowned with gray. And I'm talking more than just a trace. Still, he moved like no one I ever seen. Now there was a cat with grace. You're always talking about Casey this and Casey that. But I swear there was a change in the air when KC came to the plate wearing Casey's hat. He tapped his spikes and took a look at the pitcher. Then he spit into the dirt. He was holding Casey's bat in his hands, and he was wearing Casey's shirt. KC, do well, murmured his wife, waiting up in the stands. Casey, roared the crowd. And she was just as dignified and quiet as the throng there that day was loud. KC watching. KC waiting for his pitch, not worried about a thing. He'd done this 1,000 times before. He stood with the bearing of a king. He dragged the very first pitch, tossed his way, laid it down like a baby in the soft green grass, and was already rounding first when the pitcher picked up that ball and threw it past the first baseman, who watched it roll out onto the right field lawn, where the right fielder grabbed it and threw to second. But by then, KC's long gone. So the second bagman threw hard to third. A new wrinkle on that old Tinker to Evers to Chance. Except with old KC running the ball paths, those players didn't have a chance. Now, KC's rounding third and he's racing toward the plate, and the catcher's jumping up and down, waving with both hands. Where's the ball? Where's the ball? Where's the ball? Thrown in desperation over the dugout, it's somewhere up in the stands, being fumbled over and fought for. 100 hands grabbing for a souvenir, and the fans are jumping and shouting and laughing, and men are kissing women and lifting cups of beer. There's nothing can stop KC now. We're champs, you chumps, is the cry, and there's no one can stop us from winning, except KC, who slows to a stroll, and the whole world stops spinning. Go home, the crowd urges him on. Let's get this done. The game is over. The game is won. But KC is standing still now, his toe 2 inches from the plate. What's going on? The crowd wonders aloud, not knowing why KC just stands there with a halfway kind of smile. And the question races around the ballpark. From man to woman to child, what's going on? Touch the plate, touch the plate. 1,000 voices pray. But KC stills them all with a hand in air and says, let's first talk about my pay. Thank you.
I've heard that poem numerous times, and it's so special. It's creative in wonderful sorts of ways. It fits into the history of baseball. I didn't say black baseball, I said baseball, but very much so into the history of black baseball. The spirit that's there, and this new character that Kevin has brought to life, playing off that old character, Casey. Let's come back to Newark for just a bit. Because in 1935, they played in Brooklyn. 1936, a team in Newark that becomes legendary over the years, a team called the Newark Eagles. 1936 to 1948. They were always contenders, always played a very, very good game of baseball through those years. In 1946, those Newark Eagles won the Negro League World Series against the Kansas City Monarchs, which is one of the legendary teams in black baseball. A team that is second to none. If they had played the Newark Bears, the great white team in Newark at that point in time, they would have given them a game. They could easily have beaten them. Name me another team. Again, not just black teams, but white teams. Name me another one. I'll go down the list. Leon Day, pitching. Biz Mackey, catching and managing. First base, Mule Suttles. Second base, second base is not in this group that I'm giving you. We'll skip second base. Shortstop, Willie Wells. Third base, Ray Dandridge. And in the outfield, Monty Irvin and Larry Doby. Now, and I'm forgetting something too. General manager and part owner of the team, the only woman ever elected to the Hall of Fame, Effa Manley. Add them up, and every one of them is in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. That tells you something about the quality of baseball that was played in Newark through that time period. We could continue with the New Jersey focus here by doing something that, isn't done all that often. But really, Ebbets Field and the Brooklyn Dodgers and Jackie there, they're Johnny-come-latelys. Because in 1946, the color line in baseball is broken by the Montreal Royals. And where is it broken? It's broken in New Jersey, in Jersey City, at Roosevelt Stadium. Jackie debuts that day in organized baseball and goes on to have a Most Valuable Player award winning year. On that debut year, he hits a couple of home runs, certainly one, steals a couple of bases, and the rest of the season was like that too. So if you're a New Jerseyite, you can say New Jersey was first in terms of breaking that barrier. Let me kind of bring the curtain down on what we're talking about. Open it up for questions or in the chat room for questions by taking you to a place that is hallowed ground in baseball. It's called Cooperstown and the National Baseball Hall of Fame. And on this particular day, that place is New Jersey as well, because a great third baseman who played for the Newark Eagles, a third baseman, he was bow-legged, very bow-legged. You'll see that in the little video that we're going to show you. They used to say that you could drive a truck through Ray's legs, but you couldn't get a baseball through them, playing great third base. I'm talking about a fellow named Raymond Emmett Dandridge. And we're going to meet Ray right now at one of the penultimate moments in his life. It's that way with any player, because we're going up to Cooperstown. We're going to see Ray elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame, inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Could we have that section, please, Reggie?
They found out through Jackie Robinson first, and then as things went on through the rest of them, that green was the color there too, because there wasn't anybody on any team that was going to get mad at a guy who was going to get them into the World Series and get that loot.
I never knew that the money would be there, the fame and all those kind of things. It was just, you dedicate yourself to be the best you can be.
That's right.
And had it not been for guys like yourself, I know I wouldn't be there. So I appreciate it, and it's good talking to you.
And we appreciate you saying these things because, and we're happy for you.
Right, yeah.
I'm glad that the money's there for you. You understand? Because it wasn't there when we played.
I understand.
No, it wasn't there. If we didn't love the game, then we wouldn't have played it. Because for the money, it wasn't.
Right, but that's what I feel. I love the game. I like to play. You see me, I'm serious. I'm a serious ball player, but I'm smiling and having a good time too.
There was no question that this country and this sport that I'm now in charge of was not fair. And it took Jackie Robinson 40 years ago, together with Branch Rickey and Happy Chandler, to make it fair on the field of play. Now this year is a year we're dedicating to be sure it's fair off the field of play, so we can be an example again. And for Ray to come in this year, I think has much more meaning. It's a year of focus.
Right now, everybody asking me what my greatest thrill was. But my biggest thrill came when, March the 3rd, Mr. Ed Stack called my house. Yeah, you know, like you do, I was resting. My wife was in the backyard. So I answered the phone. The phone call said, I'm trying to find Ray Dandridge. I say, I'm Ray Dandridge. Say, you Ray Dandridge, the ball player? I say, yeah. And all of a sudden, he said, your life has changed. I say, what do you mean my life has changed? You know how it is, sometimes you get some of them crank calls, you know. So afterwards, me and him talk a while, and then he said, I'm Ed Stack, the president of the Hall of Fame, and you had just been elected for the Hall of Fame. Now, I want to sincerely thank each and every veteran on the committee allowing me to smell the roses. My only question is, why did you take so long? I can see in the audience, I got quite a few friends, north, east, south, west, and these people have traveled a long way, and I want to thank each and every one for coming to Cooperstown to see me elected in the Hall of Fame. In closing, let me say, if I had it to do all over again, I think I would do it the same way. I love the game of baseball, and I hope now today look like baseball loved me. So now, I'm going to say goodbye, and I hope, and I love you all. Maybe you never know how much I love you. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Well, Big Boy was a real actor. He loved the limelight. He loved to lead a parade. He always wore one of those great big, tall, whatever you call them, you know, on the top. And he strutted, he chested out. He used to stand up in the back of Wright Park and announce.
15 or 16 before I realized that people did something else on weekends other than go to baseball games. My father played baseball practically every night of the week, and after he stopped playing, he umpired, so all I ever knew was baseball.
I think Mr. Vett gave Mr. Manley and Mrs. Manley, who owned the Newark Eagles, $15,000 for me. But then all of a sudden, as the years went on, they had no contracts. See, at the end of the year, you were a free agent, although you belonged to Newark. So the scouts started scouting these people, and the owners started getting them for nothing. And that's destroyed the Negro Leagues.
See that, Thomas C. Guy Jr.?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I always say that Tom was Michelangelo. He was the director, and I was the paint store. I was the historian that brought a lot of it forward, but Tom was just wonderful, and we lost him at 54 years of age. It was an awful loss for this country in lots of ways. Ray says at one point in time, or no, he says, if I had to do it all over again, I guess I would do it the same way. Huh? Well, what's he talking about? He's talking about the Negro Leagues. I'd play with them because it was an institution that was owned and run and played by blacks. It was their own institution in lots of ways. Yes, integration is wonderful, but something was lost when we brought integration to this country. And that was that black world that was so special world. So I think that's what Ray meant there. Couple of stories maybe before we end. There's great stories that come out of the Negro Leagues.
And before we proceed, that's and thank you. Thank you for everything thus far, Kevin, the poem, the great clips. I will say my colleague Beth has shared a link to the documentary here on Zoom, and we will certainly be sure to do so on our other networks as well within Facebook for the viewers watching on Facebook. Because, I mean, just great, rich history there. And we do have a couple questions in the Q&A if you'd like to.
Okay. Sure.
The first one, I believe, is from, I think, I want to say, preface the great Bill May, who's currently his work is on display at Newark Public Library. Quick plug. Up to the end of summer, his great jazz photography of Newark, New Jersey. So please come through for that if you have a chance. But Mr. May says, questions for Larry. Did you work with the late Tom Guy at the old Hinchcliffe, not sure of the spell, Hinchcliffe Stadium in Patterson in filming these interviews?
Yes, you didn't see any of the interviews that were done there in Hinchcliffe Stadium, but very much so. We had a wonderful time there. I said Paint Store. I got the Negro Leagues there, and Tom just did a wonderful job in videoing that stadium. We had 5 Negro Leaguers with us that day: Max Manning, Leon Day, Bill Cash, Clarence Pint Israel, and Gene Benson. All of them were great guys, but they were good storytellers too, and Tom knew that. And the video that we got there was just wonderful video. Didn't Bill May take photos for us though too?
Let's see. Mr. May, if you're there, see if he's still. I was looking.
I'm pretty sure that was the case.
Yeah, he may have. If he's still here, he may chime back in.
Okay.
And another Q&A guest who actually just added to, she has a question of her own, but also just added, and the stadium just reopened. So I guess in
yes, yeah, just reopened. Yeah.
And Susan also had a question, which I guess could be for both of you. Just asking, can you provide a list of reading materials that go into the baseball teams that called Newark home from the Negro Leagues and prior to? So maybe some great books that you came across in your own research.
There are a lot of them. Some
Can
of them Larry wrote. Like that one.
I know. Can you see that, or is it?
Oh yeah.
No, you got it right.
That was it.
I had it upside down.
No, it's upside down.
No, now it is.
Oh, all right. I had it right. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. There's that one, and there are many other. There's many other books that are.
Let me just say something about that, please. The story starts for us with the father of Black baseball, Bob Peterson, back in 1972, I think it came out. And we all built on Bob Peterson's work. He's the first one to get into it, the first one to capture a lot of the players, who subsequently passed, of course. And it's called Only the Ball Was White. And I think it still holds up very well. The second book, which I held up for you, The Forgotten History of African American Baseball, I lay claim to that. That was my piece de resistance. Now, there's lots of other good books, and if you go to the librarians there at the library, I'm sure they'll be able to direct you to them. But the 2 that I bring forward now are Only the Ball Was White by Bob Peterson, and then by Lawrence D. Hogan, The Forgotten History of African American Baseball.
Great. And I have another question, just another comment as I'm going through the Q&A from Susan, who just says she believes she met you at the Jerry Malloy conference here in Newark, if you attended that. And my colleague Beth has also another book recommendation from Jim Overmeyer, who I believe is here.
Oh, yes.
In his book on, I believe it's on Ethel, let's see, Queen of the Negro Leagues.
That's right. Yeah, very much so. Jim is a dear friend, and actually used the F. Manley. I'm trying to think of her husband's name. Well, anyway, Effa was the
Foster.
Effa and Abe Manley. The collection of papers that I was fortunate enough to find of the Eagles, and now are at the Newark Library, is the primary source that Jim went to for that book. It's a very good book. And Jim is a person who's been involved in this history for a very, very long time. Is a person who on whose shoulders quite a few people. Well, it's the only book about a woman who ever got into the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I would predict there will be no women into the future that will get into it. She was a very special lady, a big part of Newark's history.
Absolutely. Another question here from one of our colleagues, Dale. Really great question and timely question as we go into this discussion of reparations that comes around often. But she asked, do you think the descendants of some of these baseball greats might be owed any money since they were so badly underpaid. So, how might the reparations conversation connect to underpaid?
You know what? One thing,
players?
Larry, I'll let you go in a second, but when they brought in a number of the players and gave them recognition that was long overdue to them and their families, they also arranged to get them pensions, Major League Baseball pensions. We worked for a number of years just recently until he died recently with Jim Robinson, the second baseman and last team captain of the Monarchs. And he lived to be 93, and his life was made much more comfortable by the Hall of Fame, Larry Hogan, and all these advocates who worked to get them pensions, major league pensions, which they had not contributed to in any way except by being great athletes and playing the same game that major league players worked. So that wasn't reparations, but it was recognizing, ways that they missed out and making it up to them. So maybe, I don't know that there's anything for their descendants, but they did bring, money that was due to these wonderful athletes.
Yeah, I think the key word that Kevin just used was due to them. With all those doors closed back there. Something else too, and this was personal payment for them. It wasn't reparations because they got it way back there. They all love the game of baseball. Well, here, I was going to use this as a closing mark. And incidentally, they also got health insurance too. Fay Vincent, the commissioner of baseball, was a very special guy in himself, was instrumental in making those two things happen. But to come back to the theme of how special they were, you frequently would be asked, were they bitter? Was there bitterness there in the doors because of the doors that were closed to them? And in a man, they would say, and I was in touch easily with 35 or 40 Negro Leaguers across the years, so I've got a pretty representative sample. To a man, they would say, no, we love the game. Now, Buck O'Neill, Mr. Black Baseball in lots of ways, John Jordan Buck O'Neill, I don't know if you remember him, so much a part of the documentary that Ken Burns did. Funny man, good man in such special ways. Buck would put it this way: there's nothing like getting your body to do what it has to do on a baseball field. It's as good as sex. It's as good as music. It wakes you up. Have no fear about me. How does it end, Kevin?
Waste no tears on me.
Waste no tears on me. I wasn't too late coming to baseball. I was right on time. The argument for reparations in terms of what was due is a very strong argument. I don't know how it would ever be achieved, but at least some stuff that was due came out to them in a time that was too slow. What does Ray say? Ray say, what took you so long? So I think Ray responds to that pretty good too.
That's great. I do want to thank you both for these great answers. Just a quick plug for the Eagles papers, which my colleague Beth has reminded me are digitized at Newark Public Archive.org details/NPL Eagles. So I'll share a link to that for the people on the Facebook chat, and we have a link in Zoom. And I guess just my own question, one of the things I'm thinking of, I'm always curious personally about just, in scholarship, in basic terms, what led you, to this history. So maybe your own personal engagement in, maybe in baseball as a whole, and then just as like this area of baseball, like when you noticed, there's maybe, this whole other world of baseball that I may have missed out on from the beginning. So if you
shall I take that first, Kev, or do you want to?
No, you go first.
Okay. I always say that my love of baseball started when I came out of my mother's womb. But black baseball comes to me in the mid to late 1970s when I'm doing my dissertation at Indiana University. And my topic would become the Associated Negro Press, a Black national news service. And I had to get into all of the great newspapers, Black newspapers, Chicago Defender, the Baltimore Afro-American, et cetera, Pittsburgh Courier. And I discovered a world that I had no real idea was there, a world of Black achievement, a world of success that they made for themselves. If the larger world, as I said earlier, is putting up those stop signs. I got fascinated with that world. The baseball world was in those great newspapers. My love of baseball led me to, I wasn't writing a book on baseball, and it wasn't a baseball book, but I fell in love with Black baseball, and more so when I began to meet the Negro Leaguers themselves. These men who were so, as Mary Baraka put it, so distinguished, so wonderful to be with. I'll lend you a little comment here that I think captures it in some funny sorts of ways. Monty Irvin. Monty was just so special in so many ways. He came to be a good friend of my family, as did a lot of the other Negro Leaguers. And my wife would say about Monty that if she and I got divorced and Monty was available, she would go after him. So, you know, that's part of the journey that I took into the world of Black baseball.
I would too.
That's
He
great.
was a
Thank you.
great man. You know what? I started maybe 25 years ago. I went to a program that Larry did at the New York Public Library with the Lions at 42nd Street. And at the time, he had maybe 18, 20 players who were, you know, in their 60s, and they were, it was like, you know, running into a ball player outside a Yankee Stadium or something. You could tell they were all, you know, 6'2" and built and confident, and they had that sense that professional athletes have, that when you look at them, you know that they are the best in the world at what they do. And there was a confidence and a humor and just teasing each other, and the stories that just made you proud to know them. And that led me to reading Bob Peterson's book, and there are so many good books. The Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars, and there's all sorts of there is a wonderful literature that all of baseball has, that other sports doesn't have. And there were a number of good books on the Negro Leagues, and it was like falling in love with any sport that I'm never going to play. I'm not, you know, I have nothing to do with these guys, except that you're proud to know that they lived. And those guys in particular. And then, you know, there was more of a connection because I got to meet some of them, you know, a number of them at the time. And then later on, as Larry and I have been doing this program for 10 years, we traveled and have spent a lot of time with 3 or 4 players in particular that I got to spend a real lot of time with. And I consider them, you know, some of the best friends and mentors that, you know, that a person could run into, that you're proud to know them. And it's a wonderful and rich history.
That's great. On that note, I thank you. I want to thank you both for one, for joining us for this program, 2, for your work to keep such rich history in the spotlight. It's truly important, and maybe more important than ever, as we kind of see in the cycle all these things that are attempted to be pushed out of the picture. So, you know,
and pushed out intentionally.
Absolutely.
Very often, or ignored, and, you know, like, you know, not to bring politics into it, but in Florida, so much rich history is being withdrawn because it scares people, or because they don't want to admit that, you know, that history is so complex and is there, you know. So it's, I don't know. Do you know what? I would like to just say that I see that the link to the documentary is up, and it's just about an hour long, and it is, the entire thing is wonderful. It is so well done that Larry and Tom Guy did that, you know, I would recommend anyone who sees this, watch the documentary. It's so good.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Reggie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie, for hosting us. And we'd be pleased to have connections from anyone into what we said tonight and respond through email or whatever.
And actually, I was going to say, well, and we could share if there's a particular email you'd like us to share. We can certainly do that for anyone who's attended on tonight on Zoom or on Facebook.
Oh, one other thing. Yeah, one other thing. I don't know if Kevin mentioned it. He highlighted the documentary, and maybe some folks didn't get it because of the little snafu there. It is available on Zoom, which I think you know, and let the people who were watching this or are watching this under the title Before You Can Say Jackie Robinson. And Kevin's poem is also on Zoom.
YouTube.
Oh, yeah. What am I saying? Zoom. Yeah, I'm. Both of them are YouTube. Yes. Yeah.
And I think that was a page you had on there, right? I think so, Larry Hogan. Yeah, so you can subscribe, and like I said, any future stuff that may be posted on there, that would be great. You know, so follow. Not only go to the videos, but if you click on that name, you're able to subscribe and just follow any of the future work that is on deck. So. Yeah, thank you both, and I should definitely. Oh, great, and we've got so Kane Songs, KANESONGS songs at yahoo.com.
Yeah.
So that's the email for Kevin Kane if you want to reach out and for anything, and we'll share the information we post online as well. I also just want to thank my colleague, comrade Beth Zach Cohen for coming through the last minute clutch and offering IT support and helping us out. So thank you so much, Beth, and thanks to my colleagues, Alicia Grant, and the amazing work she did, also including the flyer for the program, Dale Colson and Austin Williams, and everyone else at Newark Public Library. You can follow us for updates on our programs on Instagram at JBAAR_NPL. Also the same for Twitter. So thank you all again for joining us tonight. Thank you to our esteemed guests for all the great work that y'all have done, are doing, will be doing. And let's do this again in another capacity, either on here or in person.
Good.
We're willing to come to bat a second time.
Open invite. So thank you, and thank you everyone who's tuned in tonight and for your heartfelt questions. So please take care and be safe.
Good night. Thank you, Reggie. Good night, Larry.
Good night, Reg. Yeah,
Good night.
good, Kevin, always being with you.
Peace.
Larry.